Hey BookTube, it's Angie. I have a couple of, well, it's actually going to be 3 videos total that I have to upload for you guys. They were all filmed, well, the third one hasn't been filmed yet. All of the books were read pre-pandemic. I had meant to film them, well, keep getting mixed up with myself. I filmed 2 of them, I just never uploaded them, and then the pandemic happened. So these were filmed quite a bit back. So I thought I would do a little bit of an intro to stick on to the front of the first 2, since, like I said, I haven't filmed the third one yet. So that'll be in recent times in the future, I guess. But yeah, I just wanted to preface the first 2 with a little bit of a video, because I was looking back at the footage, and it's, you know, when you start going through I guess like a health, mind, body, all that, when you start going through a transformation like that, it's kind of painful to look back on old videos and be like, holy hell, why did nobody say my body was going to shit? Yeah, so the old videos of me are kind of hard to look at now, but the content I think is still pretty good, so I'm still going to use them. But yeah, I just wanted to preface the videos and say that they were filmed quite a bit ago, in probably, I want to say at least 3 or 4 months before the pandemic started, maybe before that, I can't remember exactly. But yeah, since then, if you've watched my most recent video with the hey, I'm back update and all that, I kind of go into the health issues I ran into recently and sort of the life overhaul I had to do to basically save my ability to walk, which has been great. It was a push I needed. There were a lot of things that were screwing up my head. I was getting really bogged down by things in life, and it was causing a lot of heaviness in my mind, which started affecting my body, which started putting a lot of weight on my body, which for a while I was ignoring. And so now I've been redoing things that were problematic in my life and going in a healthier direction. So a lot of the weight that was bogged up on my body, despite the odds, has started coming off, even though part of, if you haven't watched that video, one of the, well, 2 of the conditions I have, there's 3 total that they know of so far, but 2 of them I've been told make it sort of a Herculean task to get weight off of my body, because my body does not want to shed weight like a normal healthy body. It basically makes this sort of, it's not like regular fat tissue. When it develops, it makes this sort of like corded version, which my therapists have told me, my physical therapists have told me that that doesn't really come off that easily with just workouts alone. You have to kind of redo everything, which I've been doing little by little, and I've actually taken off more than they thought. They were, like I said in that video, they were originally telling me that I could look forward to basically maintenance but not improvement, and yeah, I kind of cast that decision to the wind and said, no, we're definitely going to have improvement. So yeah, a lot of that weight has been coming off, been eating better, been more mindful of taking care of my skin and things that I used to do in the past, because I've kind of gotten out of, not gotten out of completely, but I'm coming out of that like depressive fog that was sitting over me. I've been working really hard to turn that around. So all that to say that, yeah, I don't love the way I look in the old videos. I will say, not only with just like the weight that was in my face, oh my God, the lipstick choice for the second video, I think it's gonna be, holy shit. I remember picking that thinking, okay, it kind of matches what I was wearing, and in person, it didn't look that bad, but it did not photograph or end up on camera, I guess. It did not video well, basically. And I didn't realize, I mean, when I'm filming, like, I have the viewfinder, but I'm not always paying attention to it because I'm trying to film. So I guess I didn't notice when I was filming, but yeah, that lipstick choice aged the shit out of me. But we'll let it go. We'll get over it, and just focus on the content. So yeah, video 3 in this series will be in, like I said, modern times. And yeah, just focus on the content, as far as, you know, the subject matter talking about these. All 3 of these videos will have to do with Nobel Peace Prize winners that I read about that did really good things for the world. So focus on that. Okay, I'm done here. All right, we'll talk later, guys. Bye. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of memoirs I recently finished for Nobel Peace Prize winners. I'll find my words eventually. The first one, even though she won it more recently, I'm going to talk about is Malala Yousafzai. This one she won in 2014, I think. When she was 17, she became the youngest recipient ever. So I'll talk about her first. And then the other one I have is, oops, let me move my notes off the cover of this, Wangari Maathai, who won in 2004, I think. But I have a lot of notes for her. So I figured she should probably get her own video. Let's start with Malala's book. This one was everywhere a few years back. This particular edition came out in 2013. And I was wondering, because when I was reading this, it does say on the cover, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, but I don't think it's brought up at all in this book, except for, I think maybe she talks about being nominated at one point, but it doesn't really talk about anything after that. And when I looked it up, I think online it did say that she won it in 2014, so it probably wasn't mentioned in the original text. This is just a reprint cover after she won. I just thought I would mention that if you read that and then wonder why it's not mentioned, if it's kind of the reason why people know her now, other than the attack, which I will get into here. So, the thing that most of the world knows Malala now for is in October of 2012, well, the story broke later, but the day in October 2012 when she and a bunch of schoolmates were in a school bus that was stopped by the Taliban, and they were questioned, and then gunfire opened up. Malala was struck in the head, and 2 or 3 other girls in the bus were also struck. I think when she talks about it in her book, the other girls that were hit had more superficial wounds, like they were grazed or something, so they were quickly treated and released back to their families. Malala's was much more serious. It actually went through the side of her head. It was one of those ones that like barely missed the important stuff, but she still was rushed to emergency care, spent months in ICU, nearly lost her life. There was a lot of reconstructive work that had to be done, and a lot of treatment for brain swelling and all of that kind of stuff. But her memoir doesn't actually focus on all of that. It does talk about it a little bit, obviously, because it was part of her life and how she became known to the rest of the world. But her memoir itself focuses more on her upbringing, things that were going on in her life at the time or prior to the attack that might have led up to the attack. So she gets into a lot about her Pashto upbringing. She grew up in the Swat Valley in Pakistan, and so she has a lot of pride in that area, and she talks about why she loves that area so much and why it's so special to her. And if you look up pictures of Swat Valley in Pakistan, you can understand, because it's green and it's gorgeous. She talks a lot about her upbringing with her parents. Her mom is illiterate, but her dad, I don't know if he still does it. I think now he's more involved in the running the Malala Fund. But when she was writing this, she was talking about how he was a school superintendent. He helped build schools in the area and got them up and running, found teachers for the area and all that stuff. And I think he had 2 or 3 schools going throughout the course of her story. She was born and raised in the city, but she talks about how she always felt more comfortable in the countryside, even though her country cousins gave her a lot of flack about her city clothes and you know, the way she spoke and the way she held herself and her easy access to books and all those things. She talks about reading the Twilight series when she was like 10, and there never seemed to be too much trouble for her to get educational materials. And she acknowledges that she understands now. She didn't really think about it so much back then, I think, but now she understands that she had a lot of privilege in an area where there were a lot of women who were forced into very suppressed lives. There were plenty of women that were expected to wear either head-to-toe coverings or at least keeping their face covered. There were women that were punished for wearing white if they were found wearing white because it was considered a man's color. Women were thrown into prison for wearing nail polish, or she writes about one girl that was poisoned by her own family because she was caught flirting. Women that were forbidden from laughing in public. There were also stories in here about women who were used as tokens, basically, to settle disputes between warring tribes. They were used as an offering, essentially. Just not a great time for women in that area. It just seemed to be a lot of suppression of individuality, you know, keep them controlled, keep them contained, keep them uneducated, keep the curiosity out of them, keep them from asking questions, all of that sort of thing. It never sat right with Malala because of the upbringing she had and her passion for school. And there's a statistic she shares towards the end of the book that kind of ties into all this and makes sense about why it's so important for her. She mentions that at the time of the writing of this book, there were 50 million illiterate adults in Pakistan, 2/3 of them women, one of them being her mother, and 5 million children who had never set foot in a primary school. And one of the things that is brought up in this story is that that's a common way for governments to keep their citizens in control, in check, is keep them dumb, keep them from asking questions, keep the education minimal. And it's, if you want to fight corrupt governments, if you want to fight governments that are just so sure they can screw you over, one way to do that is to make sure you're educated. And not in the way that a lot of people in the States consider themselves educated now, where they see something on the news, they believe what the news says, and then they repeat just a phrase they heard. They never tend to look up things for themselves, or if they do, they don't use fact-checked, reliable websites. They use websites that just reiterate the crap that they already believe. So that's not the same as getting yourself educated. Educated means you have to take in a bunch of different sources, even from sources you might not agree with or thought you would agree with. You have to be very unbiased when you educate yourself. You have to take it from all areas. And that is the way that you fight against corrupt governments who assume you're going to be stupid, which I wish that idea would catch on more in my country now, but that was something that was running through my mind a lot while I was reading this. I was seeing a lot of similarities of the way she was talking about governments running there and some of the things I'm seeing starting to happen here that a lot of people apparently don't have an issue with. there are a lot of people who do have an issue with it, but I'm a little bit scared the majority that don't are gonna have a hand up. Anyway, not talking about that, talking about her. So yeah, she grew up attending these events with her father. They would both give speeches trying to get people behind providing equal opportunities, educational opportunities for everyone in the country. Didn't always go so well, but you know, you gotta keep trying when you believe in something. And it was going all right until she started to see evidence of the Taliban slowly creeping into her area. When she mentions when she's growing up, it's not so much a problem when she's younger, but then when she gets a little bit older, into like her preteen, early teen years, she starts to see the influence seeping into the Swat Valley area. And eventually it comes to, what was it, May 2009, the Taliban forces really make their presence known in the area, and Malala's family and several others in that Swat Valley area end up being forced to leave for a while. They all find different places to go temporarily while the Taliban takes over that area. Eventually, Taliban is driven out or leaves, and word comes that the Swat Valley residents can return. So they come back and they're trying to rebuild their lives in that area, and then they get hit with a devastating flood first, and then probably in part because of the flood, they also suffer a cholera outbreak right behind it. Just one thing after another, and then she goes into when the attacks happened. Not attacks, one attack. The big one was enough. She gets one attack that ends up being the attack on the school bus that disfigures her face. She goes through a lot of reconstructive treatments, like I mentioned, and she does end up surviving, but she has to be exiled once again, this time to England. I don't know if she ever fully returned to Pakistan to live, because I went to do like a where are they now kind of thing on her, because she's not mentioned so much in the news, at least in the US these days. So I was kind of curious where she's at now, because the book, I believe, was written when she was 16. So I wasn't sure what happened to her after that. She's 22 now, according to the internet, and she's currently working on a college education in Oxford. She and her dad still run the Malala Fund. That was set up after the attacks. I think, yeah, it said it was set up in 2013. The Malala Fund is meant to help different areas around the world. I believe it's an international organization, nonprofit, set up to encourage educational opportunities for young girls. Scholarships, they do fundraisers, they have mentorship programs, they provide school supplies to areas that need them, all that kind of stuff. And first donation was $200,000 from Angelina Jolie, and since then the fund receives $4 million grant money every year. I started this book originally back in 2017, I think, and I kept putting it down for other things that, if I'm being honest, I wanted to read instead. Not because I don't think it's important. I think there is important material in her story. It's just the sheer way it's written, it's not the most riveting read. And part of that could be because she came out with this when she was 16, but you could also argue it could have been better throughout. Not to say it's boring, but it's slow. A lot of times. But there was one part I had tagged, you know, when I was mentioning some of the commonalities I was seeing between like what she was saying with the kind of shadiness going on in her country's government. There was something in here that struck me as like, oh yeah, that sounds familiar. This was in reference to elections, the election process in Pakistan. She says, usually politicians only visited during election time, promised roads, electricity, clean water, schools, giving money and generators to influential local people we call stakeholders who would instruct their communities on how to vote. Of course, this only applied to the men. Women in our area don't vote. Then they disappeared off to Islamabad if they were elected to the National Assembly or Peshawar for the Provincial Assembly, and we'd hear no more of their promises. And, you know, obviously in the US now women are allowed to vote, but I'm just saying, again, it was in my mind because maybe we're coming into an election year now, so all of these things are once again stirred up in the US, where this is something you see quite frequently. You have a lot of people come in that make a lot of promises and say all the right words and hit all the right platforms, and then once they get into office, all of that comes to a screeching halt. Or if they do something about it, it's in the most minimal way, and you're just left sitting there going, are you gonna get off your butt and tackle these things that got you into office? No, you're just gonna go play golf. Okay. So yeah, it was interesting to me to see that, like, you know, the borderlines be damned, we're not really that different when it comes to politicians, apparently. So yeah, I didn't have a ton to say about this one, but yeah, there is some interesting material. I think I kind of agree with some of the other reviews I read on Goodreads and such that said this book could have been stronger maybe if she had addressed it a little bit later, just a little bit later in life, like maybe even now that she is out of her teen years, she's an adult, she's a college student, all of that, she might have had a slightly more grown perspective to it that could have given it just a little more seasoning. I don't know. But still, like I said, there is plenty in here that is admirable and important to address. One of the things I did like is that she, in addition to her story, she also gives you a nice breakdown of different political and religious climate situations that are going on or were going on at that time. They're still terms we hear in the news a lot now, so if you hear these terms and you're not quite sure what they mean, even for, you know, US viewers, she does a good job of like breaking down what the, you know, country border disputes are, why this country had a war with that country, you know, all of those things. She has an interesting perspective on some of the 9/11 topics. There was one in here I mentioned in the written review, which I'll post down below. There was a unexpected and interesting kind of first-person account of the whole like capture of Osama bin Laden and her perspective on that. I didn't realize that story hit so close to home to her, but that was interesting to read. And then also there are some mentions of some shady double-dealing type relationships that were going on with government officials between the US and Pakistan during or post 9/11, I guess it would be. So that was interesting to read. And then she also gets into, you know, if you're confused about what the differences are between Sunni and Shia groups, Sunni and Shia, she explains how that came about, how that split came about. So yeah, I can see why this is often, I mean, is it? I think when it first came out, it was pretty commonly suggested as recommended reading in classrooms. I don't know if it still is actually, but I could see why, because I think they came out with the young readers edition, but even as like this, it's still pretty simple in tone. So it's good also if you are an adult who is not all that read up on politics, but you're kind of curious about her story. This one is good for reading about those kind of topics in layman's terms. So that's what I have for this one. So I'm going to click off of this video and come back with Wangari's story. Stay tuned. We'll talk soon.